When will this continent wean itself of dependence on our former colonial masters? The chairperson of Ghana's Electoral Commission has come out to indicate the dearth or scarcity of the needed expertise to maintain biometric machines and other forms of deficits in terms of capacity building within the Electoral Commission. And we are only how many months away from our next election? We are about 18 months or 19 months, approximately a year and a half away from a very critical election. I dare ask, why then do we pay lip service to Ghana's independence, Africa's independence, Africa rising? This is the era for the Black continent and all that. We know how delicate elections are in this part of the world. And before entering into the election season, if all we hear is that we don't have the needed expertise, we don't have the needed capacity to carry out a transparent, free, fair, and an efficient electoral process, then that gives us a cause for concern. So where do we go from here? The Inter-Party Advisory Committee, IPAC, is seen as a nexus between the political parties and Ghana's Electoral Commission. But time and again, the outcome of meetings with the Electoral Commission have pointed to bad blood or bad faith between the Electoral Commission and the opposition. In the lead up to the 2016 election, we saw the same level of mistrust between the Electoral Commission at that time and the political party which is in power today but was in opposition during that period. So what are we not getting right as a country? Because the Electoral Commission is meant to be an arbiter. It is meant to be an objective and independent umpire that referees the electoral contest between the incumbent and the opposition. The same good old stories. We don't trust the system. There are attempts to rig the election in favor of the incumbent party or the party in power. We don't trust the limited registration process. It is meant to give undue advantage to the party in power. The electoral register is not in a good shape. We question its integrity. It must have been underwritten in certain areas where we have our strongholds, or it is bloated. These are age-old accusations leveled by opposition political parties against parties in power all across this continent. And we can't underestimate the importance of the role of the Electoral Commission in ensuring the peace, serenity, and stability of the Republic of Ghana. And every now and then, when we hear anything from the quarters of the Electoral Commission, we hear accusations, just as we used to hear when the current party in power was in opposition. The other day, out of the sheer preponderance of mistrust between the Electoral Commission and the main opposition party, there was a leaked tape. And of course, before you sit through such delicate meetings with the Electoral Commission, the EC and the political parties present should know that everything that is discussed is meant to be confidential, except that which is worthy of being shared with the general public or party faithful. General issues about the timelines that are used in the electoral process, general issues about the legitimacy now, eligibility of people to register. These issues, if discussed at the Electoral Commission at a meeting between the EC and political parties, can willingly be shared with the general public. But for somebody to, out of bad faith, record proceedings of such an important engagement with political parties just to play on air and create an impression of friction, whatever that may be, whether real or perceptive, between the main opposition and the Electoral Commission, that gives me a serious cause for concern. Let's not enter 2020 on one leg, because political parties in opposition think that the Electoral Commission is out there to do the bidding of the political party that is in power. The former leadership of the EC had its successes and its challenges. This current leadership has its successes and its challenges. The Electoral Commission itself has got its own successes and challenges, and it's got its own deficits, just as the EC chair has indicated. But what do we do in a circumstance like this? We can only call for mutual trust and mutual respect between the EC and all political parties. We are human, and of course, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Of all the people in the country, if any president should handpick you to be a part of the leadership of the Electoral Commission, that means you are part of an elitist, privileged few. It's an honor. So there is a temptation to want to do things to please the appointing authority, which is natural. I wouldn't have done differently if I were in anybody's shoes. The former EC chair was accused of bias. The current EC chair is being accused of bias. These are natural tendencies we all have. It's just like the MD of your company giving you a promotion. Won't you do things to satisfy the MD? You certainly will. But then, in the midst of all these challenges that bring to question the ethos and ethics and standards of professionalism in the conduct of elections around the world, we need heroes and heroines that can weather the storm and remain objective. Because when nations go to war in democratic countries, they go to war because of the misconduct of elections in most cases. La Côte d'Ivoire went to war because of an election. Many other countries have gone to war because of elections. So I call on, number one, the Electoral Commission to work on its public relations, number one, and how it communicates proceedings of meetings with political parties, its timelines, and how it engages everybody, because we are all stakeholders. Never think for a moment that this country belongs to someone other than you. You, the people, own this country. We, the people, give mandates to leaders to represent us. So they don't own the Republic of Ghana. Collectively, we do. We are stakeholders in the stability and prosperity of this great republic. So don't sit aloof and think when people argue, okay, it's meant for politicians, they can go do their argument. You spawn these politicians, whatever power they have, you gave them. So you are as much a stakeholder in the activities of the Electoral Commission as is anybody anywhere within the value chain in the governance system. You are no less of a stakeholder than they are. So I have serious concerns. The EC has a lot of work to do to build trust and build confidence in the process and engage people, engage the electorate, engage political parties, communicate in a diplomatic way, try as much as possible not to be on a collision course with the opposition political party, because we are told today nobody can rig an election in favor of anybody. So why don't we adopt some niceties and pleasantries in the conduct of the electoral process, however it may be, and how we communicate to political parties, both in power and those in opposition, and the larger electorate. So on the side of the Electoral Commission, I think a lot of work needs to be done to build confidence in the process and take away the perception that someone is out there to tip the balance of advantage in favor of the ruling party. These allegations and accusations are not new. Only 3 years ago, the party that sits in the Jubilee House was accusing the now opposition party of the same, perception of bad faith and bias. So how can we tackle this once and for all? The Electoral Commission, even though appointed by the party in power in some cases, apart from Afarijan, that served across regimes. The fact that you are appointed by the appointing authority itself for themselves will not be there forever. They are tenants in the Jubilee House. The Jubilee House is owned by the people. So on the side of the Electoral Commission, I think there needs to be good faith going into the election. And of course, the things that they've complained about, lack of capacity, lack of expertise in handling biometric machines and all that, can be tackled. And I keep wondering why our former colonial masters should play such game-changing roles in how we elect presidents on this continent. Why can't we fund an election as easy as it is? We need to rely on the European Union. We need to rely on the United States. We need to rely on international partners. Do they seek assistance in their own elections? Anybody who doles out money to you can influence decisions you take. So how independent is the Electoral Commission? And how independent are we as a country and a continent? Number two, the party in power. To be in power in the lead up to an election is a double-edged sword. You have the advantage of controlling the resources of the country. You can have a very colorful manifesto, have a flamboyant campaign. You'll be flush with cash, with a lot of money to spend. You may have your own influence over the electoral process because you give birth to the leadership of the Electoral Commission. But please, let nobody try to abuse such an advantage. Whether party A is in power or party B is in power, let's try as much as possible not to abuse that advantage. The disadvantage you have as a party in power is that people think you've been given a shot, and maybe you've not been impressive enough. People see you around as appointees who are in the trenches fighting to come to power only a few years ago. They saw the kind of clothing you put on. They saw your skin tone. They saw the modest lifestyles you had. And in no time, at the snap of your fingers, life is so rosy. You don't even mingle with the people you used to mingle with. That gives you a certain disadvantage. You are seen as the bourgeoisie or the bourgeois. You are seen as people that are elitist, people that are enjoying while others are struggling. And mind you, all men were created equal by Allah. All men were created equal. Now look at those that were in power and have gone into opposition. Their lifestyles have changed. They are more modest now, just as some of them were before power came knocking on their doors. And you can also see the lifestyles of those that are in power today. It's a natural phenomenon. If you have one Ghana cedi in your pocket, you don't behave the same way when you have $1 million in your account. It's all nice, it's all fair and good. God decides to change people's socioeconomic status. That can happen through commerce, it can happen through politics, however it happens. But please, let's all endeavor not to make any attempt to abuse power and try to manipulate the electoral process. It's dangerous for the stability of the Republic of Ghana. And to the opposition, you've had the opportunity to rule. You've had the opportunity to appoint an EC chair. You've had your shot at the presidency. Embrace fair play. Don't make any hue and cry out of nothing. Don't create a mountain out of a molehill. For those issues that are germane to ensuring a free and fair election, you can bring them to the fore for the people to have a look at and seek reforms. But if you run to the press on every little disagreement, when you sit around the negotiating table or you sit in meetings with officials of the Electoral Commission, it doesn't paint a good picture of the Republic of Ghana to the outside world. Let good faith, mutual goodwill, mutual respect be the hallmark of your relationship with the Electoral Commission and the party in power. And to the people, we make and unmake leaders. The choice is ours to vote in 2020 to maintain the status quo or vote for change. Ours is to help and support the Electoral Commission. It is my tax money and yours that is used to equip state institutions. So let's all do well and make election 2020 even more peaceful than election 2016. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.